So what about people who, and there actually has been quite a few of these people that either bought a DD1 or a DD2 recently and are now going, oh, I wish I'd waited, or that have already owned one and are thinking about actually selling it and then buying one of these instead. So the justification that I've seen is people saying, well, I run my DD1 or my DD2 at around about 8 Newton meters anyway. So do I really actually need that, or should I just go with one of these? Would it be a better fit for me? So let me just read out what I've written in my notes here, and then feel free to jump in at any point and disagree.
Okay.
So I wrote, for me, I couldn't tell a huge difference between the CSL DD and the DD1, DD2 at the same torque settings. What I mean there is if I set my DD1 or my DD2 to those torque levels, I couldn't feel a big difference between these and those wheelbases. That goes for with and without the boost kit, but I do prefer a bit more inertia and friction in my wheels than some others might. So, and we kind of talked about that before, I did end up turning up that inertia just to give it a slightly more weighty feeling, to simulate the feeling of a steering rack in a real car. For esports drivers, drifters and so forth, you're probably not going to be doing that, so it may be a little bit different. So I'd say by all means, if you find that you only ever run your DD1 or DD2 at similar torque values to what we can get out of this guy, and don't find that you miss having that extra dynamic range, then by all means sell the DD1 or DD2 and buy this. I don't really see any reason why you'd be disappointed, but for me, I'd probably still at some point want to upgrade purely for more dynamic range. I think if Fanatec were to come out with a CSW DD, again, as we mentioned before, at around 10 to 15 Newton meters, then that's probably where I'd begin to start questioning the purpose of anything stronger for the majority of people. So I do think that, you know, and I've said this quite clearly before, I think that the Simucube 2 Ultimate is complete overkill for pretty much everybody outside of a commercial kind of thing. I think that the Simucube 2 Pro is more than enough. I think that, and we did this when we compared the DD1 and the DD2, I said, you know, unless you really need that extra dynamic range, unless you're Dwayne Johnson, then, you know, you're probably okay with the DD1. All the other things like warranty and the kill switch being included aside. For me, using this, when I ran it with the 5 Newton meter power supply, I did max it out at 100% and I wanted more. When I ran it with the Boost Kit 180, I maxed it out at 8 Newton meters and I still kind of missed having that little bit of extra. As I said before, with my Simucube 2 Ultimate, I do run that at around sort of 9 to 12, sometimes 15, depending on the car. So this was a little bit on the weaker side for me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think you're really missing out on the corner forces, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's that feeling of the car going around the corner and fighting against it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to the sharp, more impact kind of things, hitting curves, that kind of stuff, it's fine. Like
absolutely.
You get a really nice quick response out of it, which is more than enough.
Definitely.
But the corner forces really were missing, and I'm pretty glad to be going back to the DD1 because of that. It's very valuable to me. And I wonder if you're running your DD1 at 8 Newton meters, are there some other settings that you might be able to be...
Well, that's what I'm thinking too. I think
we might... missing out a bit there?
Yeah, I think that it might be worth doing another sort of updated settings and fine-tuning video, because we did do that video a while back where we kind of went through the entire tuning menu and explained what everything does. But I think it might be good to sort of maybe make like a fundamentals course or something where we actually say, all right, so you've got your new DD, let's go through and actually get the most out of this for your...
But in a nutshell, if you're turning your torque right down that far so that you don't have the big extremes... you can instead be sort of squishing everything up, rather than just bringing them all down.
That's what a compressor does in audio.
Exactly,
it's squishing the audio signal to make everything the same volume,
rather than just bringing it down.
But you're losing that dynamic range and that kind of flow. So
So I really feel like 15 is where you start getting the most out of it.
Yeah, so, I'd agree with you. Somewhere between, for me, 10 to 15. Again, it will depend on how strong you are. There are plenty of people that I know that run 20 plus Newton meters and, you know, can't drive anything less. So they're obviously a lot bigger than I am.
It's interesting.
But,
I would have thought that, you know, they'd still be sensitive to the lower torques. It just means that they can handle the bigger ones as well.
I don't know, but again, it just comes down to that dynamic range. I mean, if you're peaking out at 20 Newton meters when you're going over bumps, then you know, unless you're running linearity mode off and you're kind of bringing up everything else as well, then. But I guess the point here is that, you know, for both of us, we wouldn't sell our DD1 or DD2 to buy this. No. I just don't think, even though the texture's there, and in terms of, you know, graininess and smoothness and, you know, fidelity, yes, it's very, very close. The dynamic range just isn't quite where it would need to be. I think
it's a very familiar feel. It doesn't feel like a different...
It feels like the same, but just...
Less.
Yep. Yeah, I think is a fair way of putting it.
Okay,
so, I think, again, you know, if we were talking about a Club Sport wheelbase DD that was 10 to 15 Newton meters...
That's interesting.
That would be very different, but I don't think that this is a replacement for a DD1 or a DD2.
Nah.
At least not unless you're drifting or doing something that just doesn't require that dynamic range in the first place.
Yep.
Yep. Fair?
Yep.
Cool.